In early 1944, at Wright Field, located in Dayton, Ohio, a fearless test pilot confidently activated the engine of a P-51B Mustang fighter, pushing beyond the usual parameters of emergency combat power. The powerful engine roared deafeningly, and boost pressure reached 75 inches of mercury, thanks to an innovative experimental fuel known by the codename Grade 150. The airspeed indicator needle rapidly surpassed values previously considered the limit for Allied fighters. At 25,000 feet, the legendary Mustang achieved an incredible speed of 448 miles per hour. On the ground, test engineers exchanged excited glances as the pilot's report came over the radio. This was no mere incremental progress, it was a revolution hidden within the purple-hued aviation gasoline. The chemical superiority was so profound that it could shatter all of the Luftwaffe's perceptions of American fighter potential. Fundamental changes were coming to the European war, and the key factor would not be a new aircraft or a brilliant tactical innovation, but rather a fuel allowing existing fighters to demonstrate characteristics exceeding German expectations. However, the German Air Force, known as the Luftwaffe, was not yet aware that the Allied powers, specifically American and British chemistry and fuel specialists, had achieved a breakthrough that remained unattainable for the Third Reich's ambitious synthetic fuel program. While German fighters struggled with B-4 fuel, which had a lean mixture octane rating of 91, and the most advanced C3 fuel barely matched Allied Grade 130 fuel in quality, the American refining industry was already producing aviation gasoline with a performance number of 150. This technological leap had enormous consequences on the battlefield. A P-51 Mustang fighter, fueled with standard Grade 130 fuel, demonstrated an impressive speed of 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. But when the same aircraft, piloted by the same individual and at the same altitude, used Grade 150 fuel, its speed increased to over 448 miles per hour. German fighter pilots, already wary of the Mustang's range and high-altitude performance, were soon to discover that the Americans had dramatically changed the rules of engagement in air combat. The Luftwaffe's primary fighter in early 1944, the Messerschmitt Bf-109G, achieved a maximum speed of 400 miles per hour at its optimal altitude. The Focke-Wulf Fw-190A, another German fighter, could reach 408 miles per hour under ideal conditions. In confrontations with Mustangs using Grade 130 fuel, German pilots could at least hope for a relatively even fight. However, once Mustangs transitioned to Grade 150 fuel, German fighters found themselves in an inherently losing situation that neither superior pilot skill nor tactical maneuvers could overcome. Air superiority achieved through fuel, a triumph of science and engineering. The history of this decisive advantage is rooted not in military actions, but in the peaceful laboratories of petroleum chemists. They understood that the octane rating is a measure of a fuel-air mixture's resistance to compression before spontaneous detonation. A higher compression ratio opened the way to increased power with each combustion cycle. Greater power, in turn, translated into faster aircraft and higher altitudes. The scientific concept was simple, yet the engineering solutions required for the industrial production of high-octane aviation fuel presented a colossal challenge. In 1940, as the flames of war engulfed Europe, the American aviation industry focused on producing 87-octane gasoline. This was sufficient for civilian aviation and initial military pilot training, but clearly inadequate for high-performance combat aircraft. Meanwhile, Britain, desperate for any advantage over the superior forces of the Luftwaffe, began collaborating with American oil companies to develop 100-octane fuel. This fuel arrived just in time for the Battle of Britain and immediately demonstrated its superiority. British Spitfire and Hurricane fighters, fueled with 100-octane gasoline, suddenly increased their speed by 30 to 40 miles per hour at altitude, and their rate of climb rose by 1,000 feet per minute. German pilots, who previously felt superior using 91 100-octane fuel, unexpectedly found themselves facing equal terms. The breakthrough in creating grade 130 fuel marked a new era in aviation. This gasoline, with a rich mixture octane rating of 130, became the cornerstone of Allied air power throughout 1943. It fueled the Merlin engines in both Spitfire and Mustang fighters, the Allison engines in the P-38 Lightning, and the powerful Pratt & Whitney R-28,000 radial engines in the P-47 Thunderbolt. Under the leadership of General James Doolittle, a visionary pioneer and aviation fuel enthusiast, production rapidly ramped up. As early as the 1930s, he tirelessly urged both military and oil companies to invest in the development of high-octane fuel. By 1943, 17 Allied refineries were producing high-octane aviation gasoline using catalytic cracking technology, refined by French immigrant engineer Eugène Houdry. American plants alone produced millions of gallons monthly, enough to sustain a massive bombing offensive against Germany and the growing fighter forces protecting those bombers. In contrast to the Allies, Germany faced severe limitations in fuel production due to its reliance on synthetic fuel derived from coal. The Bergius process, which converted German coal into aviation gasoline, was technically reliable but slow and required significant resources. Even at peak production, Germany could not match the volumes of high-octane fuel produced by American refineries. The majority of German fighters used B-4 fuel with an octane rating of approximately 91. Premium C3 fuel, primarily intended for Focke-Wulf 190s with BMW 801 engines and some Messerschmitt models, was comparable to Allied grade 130 fuel, but its production was extremely limited. By 1944, probably about two-thirds of German aviation fuel was grade C3, yet even this volume was insignificant compared to Allied production. To understand fuel characteristics, one must consider the basic principles of internal combustion engines. The octane rating indicates a fuel's resistance to detonation. During the compression of the fuel-air mixture by the piston, temperature and pressure rise sharply. If the fuel ignites spontaneously before the spark plug fires, detonation occurs, an uncontrolled explosion instead of uniform combustion. Detonation creates shock waves that can damage or destroy engine components. A higher octane rating means the fuel can withstand greater compression without the risk of detonation. An octane rating cannot exceed 100, as this value reflects detonation resistance comparable to pure isooctane, which is the standard reference. However, performance numbers .pn exist that demonstrate a fuel superiority over pure isooctane. For instance, a fuel with a performance number of 150 can withstand 50% more compression compared to pure isooctane before detonation begins. Achieving such characteristics require the use of anti-knock additives, primarily tetraethyl lead untold, as well as the precise blending of aromatic hydrocarbons like toluene and xylene with base gasoline. Between 1942 and 1943, British fuel chemists at the Royal Aircraft Establishment, RAE, tested numerous mixtures, striving to find the optimal combination of anti-knock properties, energy density, and production feasibility. Parallel research was conducted by American scientists at Wright Field, who exchanged data with their British counterparts. By early 1943, both the United States and the United Kingdom had made significant progress in developing a new generation of aviation fuel, introducing experimental batches of what was termed Grade 150 fuel. It is worth noting that this designation could be misleading, as it implied an unrealistic octane rating of 150. In reality, it referred to a fuel demonstrating a rich mixture performance number of 150 combined with a lean mixture octane rating of 100. This innovative fuel, conveniently colored purple for identification, underwent comprehensive testing throughout 1943. The test results exceeded even the boldest expectations. Merlin engines operating on grade 150 fuel demonstrated the ability to withstand a boost pressure of 75 inches of mercury, significantly surpassing the 67 inches achieved with grade 130 fuel. This, in turn, led to a substantial increase in engine power. For example, the Packard Merlin VI-1657 engine installed in P-51D Mustangs developed 1,000 horsepower in standard military mode using grade 130 fuel. However, when switching to grade 150 fuel and activating emergency combat power mode, the same engine demonstrated an impressive 1,720 horsepower in the P-51B with its Merlin V1650 Tin 3 modification. Such an increase in power allowed the engine's total output to reach approximately 1,600 horsepower. Tests conducted at Wright Field convincingly demonstrated a significant leap in aircraft flight characteristics across all flight regimes. Maximum speed at altitude increased by an impressive 25-30 miles per hour. Vertical speed, a vital metric for a fighter, increased by several hundred feet per minute. Notably, all these improvements were achieved without any changes to the P-51 Mustang airframe itself. The same aircraft flying one day on grade 130 fuel and the next on grade 150 fuel exhibited noticeably higher speed and operational qualities solely attributable to the fuel composition. In early 1944, a strategic decision was made to introduce grade 150 fuel into active fighter squadrons. This step was taken at a critical moment. The 8th Air Force, stationed in England and conducting daytime strategic bombing deep within Germany, was suffering heavy and unacceptable losses. Despite the arrival of the first P-51 Mustangs in December 1943, German fighters continued to inflict serious damage on American bomber formations. American strategists needed not just a long-range escort fighter, but one so fast that German interceptors could not evade combat or avoid engagement on unfavorable terms. In May 1944, the first batch of grade 150 aviation gasoline arrived in England, marking an important stage in supplying Allied aviation. The distribution of this valuable resource was strictly controlled, and not all fighter units received immediate access to the new fuel. The U.S. 8th Air Force Command began by equipping selected squadrons to optimize supply logistics and evaluate the new fuel's impact on aircraft combat capabilities. The British Royal Air Force, which had been at the forefront of the tests, also began re-equipping its fighter units. Priority was given to units performing high-speed interception missions, especially those countering the German V-1 flying bombs that had been terrorizing London since June in 1944. The V-1 flying bomb reached speeds of approximately 400 miles per hour, 640 kilometers per hour, flying at low altitude. Intercepting it required fighters capable of not only catching up but also surpassing this speed at low altitudes, where air density negatively affected aircraft performance. Aircraft like the Hawker Tempest and Spitfire 14 barely coped with the task of V-1 interception. P-51 Mustangs using standard fuel were operating at their limits. However, P-51 Mustangs fueled with grade 150 gasoline demonstrated sufficient speed reserves for confident interception of enemy rockets. June 18, 1944 was marked by the daring feat of Major R.E. Turner of the 356th Fighter Squadron. He displayed extraordinary ingenuity, destroying a V-1 flying bomb by skillfully nudging its wing with the wingtip of his P-51. This risky maneuver, requiring exquisite precision and lightning-fast reactions, was subsequently successfully repeated at least 16 times during the campaign. The essence of the maneuver was to bring the fighter's wingtip to within 6 inches of the V-1's wing, and then, using the force of the airflow, throw the flying bomb off balance, condemning it to an inevitable crash. In June 1944, coinciding with the Normandy landings, American P-51 pilots first widely used grade 150 fuel. The 8th Air Force, tasked with achieving air superiority over the invasion beachheads, actively utilized the new fuel for combat patrols and bomber escorts. German fighter pilots increasingly reported encounters with Mustangs, whose flight characteristics surpassed anything they had previously encountered. Luftwaffe intelligence officers meticulously collected pilot reports describing American fighters that were elusive in any flight regime, easily evading German interceptors and seemingly possessing inexhaustible power reserves. Initially, reports of the exceptional performance of American fighters were met with skepticism and attributed to pilot errors or exaggerations born of stress and fatigue. Intelligence officers analyzing the situation believed that German fighter pilots, exhausted by combat, facing numerical superiority and suffering significant losses, tended to overestimate the threat. Their claims of American machine superiority were regarded as a consequence of psychological tension rather than a reflection of the actual state of affairs. However, as time showed, this assessment was deeply flawed, and the truth was only revealed after the war. Adolf Galland, a legendary Luftwaffe ace with 275 aerial victories, predominantly achieved on the Eastern Front, personally encountered American fighters over Germany in 1944. In his post-war interviews given in the 1970s and 1980s, Galland recounted his clashes with the latest Mustang modifications. He admitted to being astonished by the outstanding performance of American fighters in the final period of the war. Galland, who later had the opportunity to test captured American aircraft, including the P-51, P-47 and P-38, specifically noted that the Mustang left an indelible impression with its high speed, rate of climb, and ability to operate effectively at high altitudes. During the aerial battles unfolding in the skies, Luftwaffe pilots, including Adolf Galland himself, could not have even imagined that their opponent was an aircraft whose flight characteristics had been radically improved by achievements in chemical science. The P-51 Mustang was operating at power levels that the designers of the machine could not have even conceived. The Merlin engine, created by Rolls-Royce engineers and licensed by Packard, was meticulously calculated for thermal loads, bearing pressure and detonation margin. Operating the engine with increased boost pressure pushed all these parameters to critical values. The innovative grade 150 fuel allowed the engines to operate in extreme conditions without the risk of destructive detonation, which would inevitably occur with lower quality fuel at similar boost pressures. The secret to this capability lay in the complex interaction of fuel and air molecules, as well as heat and pressure within the combustion chamber. Tetraethyl lead TEL, a key component of the anti-knock additive, acted as a catalyst, slowing down the chemical reactions that led to premature ignition of the fuel mixture. However, the use of TEL also had its drawbacks. This substance was toxic, requiring increased safety precautions when handled. Furthermore, TEL formed deposits on spark plugs, valves, and cylinder walls, which increased the labor intensity of aircraft engine maintenance. However, the use of grade 150 fuel with its extremely high tetraethyl lead content introduced additional complexities in maintaining aircraft readiness. Fighter squadrons that switched to this type of fuel experienced accelerated fouling of spark plugs and increased wear on engine cylinders and pistons. In response to the challenges, American ground maintenance specialists quickly made adjustments to their routine procedures. The frequency of spark plug replacement was significantly reduced, and cylinder inspections became more frequent. Additionally, engine overhaul schedules were revised. Despite the increased workload for technical personnel, the achieved increase in flight performance was deemed entirely justified. For flight crews, the transition to using grade 150 fuel also necessitated mastering new engine operating techniques. Permissible engine boost values were increased, requiring pilots to pay heightened attention to operating modes, especially at low altitudes where atmospheric pressure is highest. A crucial aspect became optimizing fuel consumption. Although grade 150 fuel provided a power increase, operating at maximum boost settings led to rapid depletion of fuel tanks. Given that the range of Mustang fighters was already critical for escorting bombers on raids to Berlin and back, full utilization of the new fuel's capabilities demanded careful consumption control, balancing maximum power with economical cruising flight. The turning point in the air war over Europe was vividly reflected in combat reports from the summer and autumn of 1944. 8th Air Force fighter squadrons, now equipped with a new generation of fuel, began to demonstrate a remarkable increase in effectiveness. The kill-to-loss ratio significantly improved, and their ability to intercept German fighters targeting Allied bombers soared. The Mustangs relentlessly pursued the enemy. German pilots, accustomed to tactics of swift attacks followed by disengagement, were surprised to find themselves unable to shake off the tenacious American fighters. A striking example of Allied air superiority occurred on August 6, 1944, when Lieutenant Hollis Bud Nerlin of the 357th Fighter Group, participating in frantic shuttle operations with landings at Soviet airfields, engaged German fighters over Eastern Europe. Piloting his P-51D, nicknamed Hellspells, and utilizing 150 grade high-octane fuel, Nerlin entered a deadly dogfight with a Messerschmitt Bf-109 flown by Günther Schack. In this duel, the American fighter's speed and maneuverability proved decisive. Nerlin, thanks to his superior speed, quickly closed the distance and opened fire, damaging the enemy aircraft's cooling system. Unwilling to expend his remaining fuel and ammunition, Nerlin broke off the pursuit, waved goodbye to the German pilot, and returned to his mission. Shack, meanwhile, managed to belly land his damaged aircraft near German positions. For 4 decades, the German ace was tormented by one question: why didn't the American pilot finish the aerial duel? It never occurred to Shack that Nalin believed he had only damaged the enemy aircraft, not sent it to a fiery demise. Much later, when historians brought the 2 pilots together on German soil, Shack was forced to admit the Yankees' Mustang displayed a power he had never encountered before. The speed of its approach and its immense energy retention in combat astonished the German pilot, as he had witnessed nothing similar in previous engagements with American fighters. This incident had a colossal psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots. Already outnumbered and facing the growing might of the Allies, they now encountered American fighters whose capabilities seemed boundless. The tactical horizons of German pilots narrowed drastically. They could attempt to unleash the full force of a massed attack, hoping numerical superiority would overwhelm the escort. They could also evade combat entirely, preserving their aircraft and lives. Or they could accept the challenge and, with a high probability, be shot down by Mustangs that surpassed them in speed and maneuverability and were flown by American aces whose confidence grew daily. The renowned Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, head of the German Air Force Luftwaffe, once made a symbolic remark upon seeing an American P-51 Mustang fighter over Berlin. He realized the war's outcome was predetermined. This statement vividly reflected the strategic impasse in which the Luftwaffe found itself. The Mustang's range was so extensive that no corner of Germany could be considered safe from massive daytime bombing raids by the US Air Force. The emergence of a new generation of fuel in mid-1944, significantly superior in performance to all existing counterparts, only exacerbated the crisis. Despite all efforts, Luftwaffe technical intelligence did manage to obtain samples of the Allied fuel, known as 150 grade. These samples were recovered from the captured drop tanks or the wreckage of downed aircraft. German fuel chemists, after thorough analysis, confirmed what Luftwaffe pilots had long suspected. The Americans had developed aviation gasoline that, in its operational characteristics, surpassed anything German synthetic fuel plants could produce, while some German sources claimed that C3 fuel, developed late in the war, approached the performance of 150 grade. Its production was extremely limited and its quality inconsistent. Decisive actions by Allied air forces aimed at destroying German synthetic fuel production facilities, especially the massive strikes on Leuna and other key targets in May-June 1944, led to an even greater reduction in German fuel output. By the end of 1944, the Luftwaffe High Command was forced to impose severe fuel rationing. Fighter squadrons received priority supply, but even they faced serious limitations. Training for new pilots was substantially curtailed. As a result, many German pilots arrived at combat units with extremely limited flight experience, a stark contrast to the training of American pilots who typically had several hundred hours of flight time before entering combat. From January to May 1944, before the widespread use of 150 grade fuel, American bombers sustained losses ranging from 3 to 6% per sortie. These losses were painful but still considered acceptable. However, from June to December 1944, following the transition to 150 grade fuel and the achievement of air superiority, losses dropped to less than 2% per sortie. Concurrently, the number of aerial victories by American fighters sharply increased. From late 1943 to May 1945, American P-51 squadrons, part of the 8th, 9th and 15th Air Forces, claimed an impressive approximately 4,050 German aircraft shot down. The lion's share of these victories occurred after June 1944, when Allied air power decisively seized the initiative in the air. German pilots, despite their extensive experience gained on the Eastern Front, suffered heavy losses and were gradually eliminated. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, only a handful of Luftwaffe aircraft appeared over the French coast, signaling a severe crisis in German aviation. Although the Luftwaffe still possessed thousands of fighters, it critically lacked fuel, skilled pilots, and effective tactics to successfully counter the Allies. The technical characteristics of 150 grade aviation gasoline are particularly noteworthy. An octane rating of 100 for a lean mixture meant the fuel possessed excellent detonation resistance, comparable to pure iso-octane, especially when engines operated in cruise mode. A performance number of 150 for a rich mixture indicated the fuel's ability to withstand 50% greater compression than iso-octane when engines operated at maximum power. This unique combination allowed pilots to effectively use cruise settings for maximum flight range and then switch to rich mixtures when increased power was needed in combat, confident that the engine would not fail even under extreme loads. Handling 150 aviation gasoline enriched with tetraethyl lead required heightened safety precautions. Specialists involved in refueling aircraft were mandated to use protective clothing and personal protective equipment. Any fuel spills were immediately cleaned up to prevent lead intoxication. Fuel tankers and stationary storage tanks for 150 aviation gasoline were brightly marked to prevent mixing with different fuel grades. Thanks to strict adherence to regulations, occupational injury rates remained low and incidents were extremely rare. The introduction of new aviation gasoline grades in operational air units was accompanied by pilot retraining. Pilots studied the characteristics of the new fuel, as well as updated instructions for engine operation. Specifically, maximum boost limits were revised. Flight operating manuals clearly stipulated the conditions and procedures for using boosted engine power settings. Importantly, the transition to new fuel grades did not require any modifications to the aircraft's design. Power plants, fuel systems, and other components were fully compatible with both types of aviation gasoline, significantly simplifying logistics and aircraft operations. An overview of production figures clearly demonstrates that the Allied powers achieved unprecedented industrial mobilization, significantly surpassing Germany's capabilities. From May 1944 to April 1945 alone, the 8th Air Force consumed over 53 million gallons of 150 grade high-octane fuel. It is estimated that the cumulative volume of aviation gasoline produced across all Allied refineries during the conflict exceeded 200 million gallons. It is crucial to understand that every gallon of this fuel required a complex refining infrastructure, the use of chemical additives including toxic tetraethyl lead, strict quality control, transatlantic transport, storage in secure facilities, and distribution to numerous airfields. America's industrial potential in 1944 reached truly astonishing scales. Factories, mass-produced bombers, and tens of thousands of fighters were manufactured. Shipyards built Liberty-class transport vessels so rapidly that German U-boats couldn't sink them fast enough. Oil refineries produced aviation gasoline in volumes far exceeding Germany's total production of all fuel types. This phenomenal success was possible thanks to decades of industrial development, vast natural resources, territory protected from enemy bombing, and a workforce that included millions of women who replaced men in factories, contributing to the victory. In the final period of World War II, the Royal Air Force RAF extensively used 150-grade fuel in its fighter operations over the European theatre. British air squadrons equipped with aircraft such as the Spitfire Mk4, Tempest Mk4, and Mustang Mk3 and Mk5 received priority supplies of this innovative fuel. The experience of RAF pilots indicated similar improvements in flight performance that had previously been noted by their American counterparts. In particular, the Tempest, already one of the fastest piston-engine fighters of its time, became an even more powerful and formidable weapon for the Allies with the new fuel. Tempest squadrons demonstrated outstanding results in combating German V-1 flying bombs. Between June and September 1944, Tempests of the RAF's 150 wing destroyed 638 of these deadly weapons, with No. 3 Squadron alone claiming 305 V-1s shot down. Among the most successful pilots was squadron leader Joseph Berry, who shot down 59 flying bombs, Belgian ace squadron leader Remy van Leeuwen, who destroyed 44, and wing commander Roland Beaumont, credited with 31 V-1s. Other successful interceptors included the Mosquito with 623 victories, the Spitfire Mk4 with 303, and the Mustang with 232. The performance advantage provided by 150-grade fuel proved invaluable in various combat situations. The effectiveness of this fuel was repeatedly confirmed in late 1944 and early 1945. Fighter groups receiving the new fuel reported a significant increase in claimed victories and a simultaneous reduction in their own losses. By March 1945, nearly all units equipped with P-51 Mustang aircraft had transitioned to using this fuel. Combat reports from that period attest to overwhelming Allied air superiority. German fighters rarely offered effective resistance to Allied formations, and when they did engage, they suffered heavy losses. In April 1945, missions over German territory often proceeded without any aerial opposition from the enemy. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was virtually destroyed as a result of resource exhaustion, fuel shortages, and the systematic decimation of experienced pilots who could not be replaced. On May 8, 1945, Germany capitulated, marking the end of World War II in Europe. Triumph in the skies over Europe became a reality thanks to comprehensive Allied air superiority, driven by a combination of factors. The P-51 Mustang fighter's impressive range, allowing it to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, played a crucial role. The high level of training of American pilots and the overwhelming numerical superiority of Allied forces also cannot be underestimated. However, one of the most vital advantages was petrochemical engineering, which provided aviation with 150-grade fuel. This gasoline, with its characteristic purple tint, transformed good fighters into outstanding combat machines, instilling confidence in Allied pilots. Its creation embodied the technological and industrial capabilities of nations able to achieve large-scale production and rapid innovation, ultimately determining their victory. In aerial combat, speed is decisive. A faster fighter gains the ability to dictate the terms of engagement, choosing moments to attack and disengage. this tactical flexibility becomes unavailable to slower aircraft. When American fighters gained a significant speed advantage through a combination of advanced design and high-quality fuel, the Luftwaffe's tactical options sharply diminished, marking a turning point in the air war. A starker dissonance existed between the positions of Germany and the Allied nations at the turn of 1944 and 1945. While Allied aircraft could undertake numerous combat sorties throughout the day, limited only by the physical capabilities of pilots and aircraft maintenance, German fighters remained grounded due to a severe fuel shortage. In the rare instances when German pilots managed to take to the air, they were forced to operate under the strictest fuel economy, which significantly constrained their combat capabilities. A Luftwaffe pilot who imprudently expended fuel in combat risked not making it back to base. At the same time, an Allied pilot could unhesitatingly use the full power of their aircraft, knowing there was enough fuel for the return journey. This operational freedom had far-reaching strategic consequences. Allied aviation could afford continuous air patrols, immediately respond to emerging threats, and provide constant support for ground operations. German fighters, however, were forced to carefully select targets, strictly ration fuel consumption, and often break off combat, not due to defeat, but due to critically low fuel levels in their tanks. Luftwaffe pilots embarked on missions knowing that each sortie could be their last, not only due to the risk of being shot down, but also due to a simple lack of fuel for the next mission. In contrast, Allied pilots flew with confidence, bolstered by tangible material superiority. They knew their aircraft were fast, their fuel tanks full, and their logistics system operated flawlessly. This confidence translated into more aggressive combat tactics, better combat results, and consequently higher survival rates. The story of 150 grade aviation gasoline is a compelling chronicle of industrial confrontation where triumph favored those who not only ramped up production of combat aircraft but also created planes with outstanding characteristics. Victory demanded not just sufficient fuel, but fuel of the highest quality, and not just trained pilots, but a vast reserve of well-prepared airmen, supported by a powerful industrial base capable of compensating for losses faster than the enemy could. American and British chemical scientists, toiling in laboratories and oil refineries, did not participate in the air battles over Germany, nor were they subjected to anti-aircraft fire or enemy fighter attacks. Yet, their meticulous work, whose results were measured in performance metrics and boost pressure data, played a decisive role in determining who would dominate the skies over Europe in 1944 and 1945. Every time a P-51 pilot pushed the throttle and felt their Mustang accelerate, outperforming German fighters, they were reaping the benefits of chemical engineering that transformed crude oil into fuel, making exceptional capabilities commonplace. German command expected American fighters to operate within predictable parameters, based on aircraft design and standard fuel characteristics. Instead, they faced fighters whose capabilities exceeded all expectations, thanks to a colossal and developed fuel production infrastructure, representing an industrial potential that Germany could not match. By the spring of 1945, as Allied forces inexorably squeezed Germany from both east and west, the Luftwaffe, once a formidable force, had effectively ceased to exist as a cohesive, combat-capable structure. only scattered, isolated units still took to the air, often with only a minimal fuel supply sufficient for a single sortie. Jet fighters, such as the Me-262, were undoubtedly outstanding technological achievements, but their appearance on the battlefield was too late, and their numbers negligible. These advanced machines suffered from a severe lack of fuel and a deficit of experienced pilots, who by then had been systematically decimated in fierce aerial battles. The final tallies clearly demonstrate the cumulative effect of overwhelming Allied air superiority. American P-51 squadrons, operating in all theaters of war, conducted hundreds of thousands of combat sorties, claiming approximately 4,950 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, and another 4,131 machines destroyed on the ground. These impressive figures reflect not only the irretrievable loss of enemy equipment, but also the deaths of valuable pilots, the loss of invaluable combat experience, and the inefficient expenditure of Germany's industrial potential, forced to dedicate resources to producing new aircraft that, in turn, were destroyed before they could significantly influence the outcome of the war. While 150-grade gasoline was not the sole reason for victory in the air, it undoubtedly played a vital role in achieving superiority. This type of fuel represented the pinnacle of technological progress that defined the outcome of battles. The 448 miles per hour that the P-51 achieved, thanks to this fuel, was not just a number, but a symbol of technological superiority and immense industrial potential. German strategists failed to foresee that American chemists and petroleum engineers, working far from the front lines, could create a weapon as powerful as guns and bombs. Purple gasoline had as significant an impact on aerial combat as advanced tactics or excellent pilot training. The key to air superiority over Europe in 1945 lay in the compression ratio of piston engines, the anti-knock properties of aromatic hydrocarbons, and aviation fuel characteristics that significantly surpassed anything Germany could offer. The P-51 Mustang aircraft soaring over Berlin in early 1944 were already prime examples of advanced aviation technology. However, those same P-51 Mustangs flying combat missions over the German capital in early 1945 underwent a significant upgrade, the use of a new high-octane fuel. It was this fuel, like an elixir of power, that allowed them to become even faster, more powerful, and more effective. The difference, measured in higher octane ratings, increased performance metrics, boosted supercharger pressure, and impressive airspeed readings, played a decisive role in determining the victor of the air war over Europe. Within this seemingly minor improvement lay the fate of Nazi Germany and a vivid demonstration of Allied industrial might. This power, manifested as a purple liquid pumped into fuel tanks, combusting in powerful engines, and transforming into victory mission after mission,